Good evening. The frantic search for a last-minute Brexit deal has reached new levels today on the eve of the European summit in Brussels. Officials are said to have agreed the basis of a new agreement, but hopes of finalising that work by midnight tonight are fading. The Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been trying to get Conservative Brexit supporters and Northern Ireland's DUP to back his revised plan for the future of Northern Ireland after Brexit. This report from our political editor, Laura Kuensberg, does contain some flash photography.
He's in a rush, a terrible rush. Keep working, he says. EU leaders will be there in the afternoon. And the negotiators on both sides will have to give their verdict to their political masters. The big players in Europe desperately want this all to come to a conclusion.
Everyone understands English, but nobody understands England. And these negotiations are taking part somewhere in this not very beautiful building.
Can there be a new understanding after so many confusions along the way? It matters most for the Prime Minister, who swept into office with the promise to fix this, his fate bound up with what happens next on Brexit. And just like Theresa May, he has a party and Parliament that's divided. Brexiteers whose votes he needs. He must keep them all on board.
We're obviously standing here hoping to be able to vote for a deal which amounts to a Brexit worth having. But as I've said elsewhere, there's thousands of people counting on us to make sure this really is a Brexit worth having.
They've been in and out of number 10, just like earlier, the DUP, Johnson's Northern Irish allies.
Well, we're continuing the discussions and no doubt we'll say something later on today.
Who are nervous about what comes next, reluctant to give away too much in a compromise over customs, with worries about the union in the future. And believe it or not, secrecy about the deal is so tight that even the cabinet don't really know what's next.
Sorry.
Excuse me, we're
marvellously. Well, you know as much as I do. I'm here rather than in Brussels, but we're hopeful. But either way, we'll be ready to leave.
Clearly there's very intensive discussions underway, but we can't be certain what the outcome will be.
We can be sure, whatever a deal looks like, the opposition won't be backing it.
I will ask all Labour MPs to vote along with the party in opposing any deal which damages rights and protections in our society or drives us into the arms of Donald Trump.
But in the morning, it's the continent's opinions that matter. France and Germany would give any draft deal the same inspection. Can Brexit happen soon without too much disruption for them? I want to believe we are finalising it, the French president said. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Angela Merkel, more convinced in recent days it can be done.
But, to use the irritating but helpful old adage, nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. The two sides seem closer tonight to a deal than they've been for months and months. But sources in the DUP believe there still are gaps there. And if one thing goes wrong, it could all go wrong horribly and fast. Good sentiments tonight do not mean signatures on a page tomorrow.
And if Boris Johnson manages to clinch it and play the hero, in Parliament, swathes of MPs are ready to stand and fight. Laura Kuensberg, BBC News, Westminster.
So just to underline, as the talks between the UK and the EU negotiators continue tonight, there has been a sharp focus, once again, on the future of Northern Ireland after Brexit. At the moment, goods flow freely between Ireland and Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK because we're all in one customs union as part of the EU. Well, Boris Johnson believes that Northern Ireland must leave the European Union customs union with the rest of the UK as part of Brexit. But there is controversy about introducing any extra checks on either side of the land border between Ireland and Northern Ireland, even if they are away from the border itself. Checks on either side of the Irish Sea between Northern Ireland and the UK are also contentious. And there is also the issue of consent. Both sides agree that there must be a role for the Power Sharing Assembly at Stormont, but it is still unclear how exactly that might happen. So let's go to Brussels on the eve of this summit and speak to our Europe editor, Katja Adler. Katja, what are they telling you there about how close they are to actually agreeing this deal?
Well, Hugh, what we understand is that there is agreement on some of those broad, difficult issues that you mentioned there, but the lights are still on in the building behind me, the European Commission building where these negotiations are taking place. For the EU, this really is a so near and yet so far moment. After 3 years of the Brexit process, there is enormous Brexit fatigue here and a big political will to get this deal done. That said, the EU is not under the same political pressure and time pressure as the Prime Minister to get things done. He is the one who says it needs to get done this week because he does not want to ask for another Brexit extension. The EU is insisting it's not going to sign up to anything until it is really comfortable with a new deal. The Prime Minister meets EU leaders here in Brussels tomorrow. It's a regular summit, but I've been told if a new legal text, a new Brexit text appears in the next few hours here, that will be the first topic of discussion amongst the EU leaders tomorrow. And if they sign off on it, Hugh, they still won't breathe a big sigh of relief, and that's because they've been here before. Remember, just about a year ago, the EU signed off on another Brexit agreement with Theresa May that went on to be defeated several times in the House of Commons. What Brussels worries is if that there is a new Brexit deal and it meets the same fate in the House of Commons, that could lead to the government pocketing any concessions the EU is making in there now, and then coming back and saying, EU, if you really want to avoid a no-deal Brexit, you're just going to have to give us more.